News. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn could be flipping on the president. The Wall Street Journal was first to report that the retired Army Lieutenant General and Trump campaign advisor is requesting immunity in exchange for his testimony. This while federal probes into alleged links between the president's associates and the Russian government plays out. In a letter posted to Twitter, Flynn's lawyer confirmed discussions between his client and the congressional committees while citing unfounded allegations, outrageous claims of treason, and vicious innuendo directed against him. He added that, quote, no reasonable person would submit to questioning in such a highly politicized witch hunt environment without assurances against unfair prosecution.
David Ignatius, those of us around the table, and you at least, old enough to remember 1986 and 1987, Iran-Contra. Boy, I'll tell you what, this story is taking off at warp speed. What are your insights this morning, David?
First, Joe, yesterday was a day that you felt dizzy. Every couple hours there was some new extraordinary development in this story. Sometimes I think it's like listening to the Watergate tapes live. You're just seeing it all happen. You know, just real time. So I think the central development yesterday is the beginning of the immunity negotiations for Mike Flynn. His lawyer says he has a story to tell, and presumably the lawyer thinks that some elements of that story might subject him to prosecution, so he wants to try to negotiate. What is it that Mike Flynn might say that would be important in this investigation? We can only speculate, but the central issue right now, I think, is he can talk about the conversations he had with Donald Trump about his contacts with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak in the phone call that took place on December 29, at the same time that the Obama administration was imposing sanctions. He can talk about what Trump's instructions might have been, if any,
right.
How knowledgeable he was. So I think that going to the heart of his conversations with the president that's the door that seems to be opening with this offer of negotiation for immunity.
And you know, David, you're talking about the dizziness. We're going to get to Nunes in a second, but the fact that you had young NSC staffers alerting the chairman of the Intel Committee, hey, come over. We've got some information we want to give you that you can then circulate outside of here. All of this unfolding, I mean, unfolding without the need of having deep throat in a garage somewhere in Washington, D.C.
He's on speed dial now, and he's got an Uber preset route. I mean, so the Nunes piece of this, again, is extraordinary. As we learn more, it's a piece of theater in which two White House NSC advisors, maybe a third, according to the Washington Post this morning, conduct research to back up Donald Trump's argument that in some way he was improperly surveilled during the transition. They clearly had that material at the White House in early March. And the strange thing is that Nunes became the transmission belt for putting that into play after the White House was just getting rebuffed. People kept saying, there's not really a story here. It became, well, it's not wiretapping, it's incidental intercepts. And so it ended up coming out this way. You have to say now with Adam Schiff, the ranking member of the House Committee, saying, we're interested, we want to learn about this. He's going to go up to the White House and look at this same material, that there are now going to be two narratives, at least in the House investigation, one about Russian covert action, the other was their improper surveillance. That's now established. So in that sense, you'd have to say Trump has gotten what he wanted out of these last 3 weeks.
We'll get back to Nunes in a moment, but first, the Senate Intelligence Committee held its first hearing into Russian meddling in the 2016 election, where Republican Senator Jim Lankford of Oklahoma had this exchange with former FBI Special Agent Clint Watts and why the Russian attack on this election took hold.
My question is, first, why did he think he could get away with it this time? This is not new for the Russians. They've done this for a long time across Europe, but it was much more engaging this time in our election. Why now? Mr. Watts.
I think this answer is very simple and is what no one is really saying in this room, which is part of the reason active measures have worked in this U.S. election is because the commander-in-chief has used Russian active measures at time against his opponents. On 14 August 2016, his campaign chairman, after a debunked incident.
When you say his, who's his?
Paul Manafort,
Okay.
cited the fake Incirlik story as a terrorist attack on CNN, and he used it as a talking point. On 11 October, President Trump stood on a stage and cited what appears to be a fake news story from Sputnik News that disappeared from the internet. He denies the intel from the United States about Russia. He claimed that the election could be rigged. That was the #1 theme pushed by RT, Sputnik News, white outlets all the way up until the election. He's made claims of voter fraud, that President Obama is not a citizen, that, Congressman Cruz is not a citizen. So part of the reason active measures works, and it does today in terms of Trump Tower being wiretapped, is because they parrot the same lines. So Putin is correct. He can say that he's not influencing anything because he's just putting out his stance. But until we get a firm basis on fact and fiction in our own country, get some agreement about the facts, whether it be do I support the intelligence community or a story I read on my Twitter feed, we're going to have a big problem. I can tell you right now today, gray outlets that are Soviet pushing accounts tweet at President Trump during high volumes when they know he's online, and they push conspiracy theories. So if he is to click on one of those or cite one of those, it just proves Putin correct.
Okay, that's
Frightening.
Okay.
frightening. And by the way, for the record, we were talking yesterday about Republican senators that are starting to really step into the gap here.
I guess.
And say enough is enough. There's Lankford from a very conservative state, basically setting this guy up.
Yeah.
To talk about how
and
Putin-
encouraging him to go on.
How
yeah.
Trump is Putin's dupe.
Well, you have adults running the Senate Intelligence Committee
Well,
investigation.
if